Cell phone evidence and a shocking new statement from a witness on the stand, blowing holes in the alibi of murder suspect Brooks Houck in the trial of the decade underway for Kentucky, the Crystal Rogers murder mystery. It's now on WHAS 11 Plus. And hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us as we end week one in Bowling Green. I'm Doug Proffitt, WHAS 11 News. On this Friday, a Louisville Metro police detective, a cell phone expert as well, taking the stand, poking major holes in the alibi of Brooks Houck using cell phone data. Plus, Steve Lawson's ex-girlfriend saying she heard the Lawsons talking about moving a body on the Houck family farm. Well, our Shay McAllister now begins our coverage going into the weekend from Bowling Green.
Well, Doug, one of the most compelling witnesses we've heard from so far was Heather Snellen. She identified herself as Steve Lawson's ex-girlfriend. She also admitted to using drugs with Steve Lawson and Joseph Lawson over the years after Crystal first went missing. And today she gave us two different pieces of really interesting information. The first is regarding a car that she shared with Steve Lawson. This has to do with that whole new theory the defense just recently introduced, the one that they're going to use to try to prove that Steve and Joseph Lawson actually weren't on the Bluegrass Parkway on July 3rd. They are going to try to prove that they were up on Boston Road, which is a road in Nelson County that just runs parallel. So she said that the car belongs to her. Her and Steve bought it when they were together before 2015, but after they broke up, she's the one who kept making the payments, and it was her car. And when she left work on July the 3rd, she was driving down the road, she passed a bar, and she saw it. So she went and got something to eat, and then came back, and using her car key, she got the car, took it, and went, and to try to hide it, she parked it at a family member's house. She said she left it there the night of July 3rd, the night Crystal went missing, and then on July 4th, she went back and she started cleaning out the car. And while she's cleaning out the car, she said today that she found needles, she found a bag of soured clothing, and then she found a little Louisville Slugger bat. That's what caught my attention, because you might remember during Steve Lawson's trial, Steve Lawson testified that he pulled a little Louisville Slugger bat out of Crystal Rogers' car when he was picking up his son Joseph Lawson after Joseph drove the car on the Bluegrass Parkway, got that flat tire, and called Steve for help. Now, how it got from that car into her car and then she found it the next day, we haven't pieced all that together yet, and in fact, the jurors haven't heard that Steve Lawson testimony, so they don't know anything about that. It's going to be really interesting to find out how or if they do present it to them. As for the second piece of information that she shared with us today, this got everyone's attention. It was something she said she overheard in 2017. She said that she was in Steve Lawson's basement doing laundry when she overheard Steve Lawson and Joseph Lawson talking about moving a body using a skid steer, a piece of construction equipment, on the Houck family farm. She said at this time they were all using drugs. She admitted that freely. And she also said after she heard this, she didn't tell anyone. She didn't go to police. She didn't talk to them about it. She said nothing to anyone. And part of the reason for that, she said on the stand today, was because she didn't want to get involved. She just wanted to stay out of it. This was about 2 years after Crystal went missing, and she didn't want to get involved in this big investigation. Well, several years later, she calls Kentucky State Police and says that she wants to give them some new information. What she actually wanted to tell them was that Joseph Lawson had been texting her about creating an alibi for that weekend of July 3rd and July 4th. She went to Kentucky State Police to one of their posts to talk to them about that. But they started pressing her for more information. And she got very emotional when she was being cross-examined about this, because Brian Butler pointed out that although she came in there willingly, they started treating her really poorly. They were yelling at her. They were saying, you know, you've got a son on the line here. She did have a custody case going on with her son. They were threatening that she could lose her son if she didn't tell the truth, if she didn't fill in the gaps, if she didn't explain more. And it was 3 hours into that interrogation that she actually shared that information about what she had heard on the Houck farm. That was the first time she said it. She said she was so stressed out she had a panic attack during this interrogation, and she was in tears on the witness stand today when she was remembering it. I will say Crystal's family was also very upset during this, and that was one of the details they had told us previously that they were really nervous about hearing. They were worried about hearing what happened to her and some of those gruesome details, and they were shaken up by it. Now, I will say this is one of those things that the jurors are going to have to weigh both sides. Was it peer pressure from police? Did she make it up, or was it the truth? Shane Young asked her right before she walked off the stand, "Are you telling the truth? What is the truth?" And she said, "I'm telling the truth. The truth is I heard Steve Lawson and Joseph Lawson talking about moving a body on the Houck farm with a skid steer." Doug, of course, the jury gets to make the final decision here.
Shay, thank you very much. So much to talk about. A very busy end of the week in this, and the best legal analyst on the air for this case so far is WHAS 11 News legal expert, Louisville attorney Nick Mudd. And Nick, you have a lot to pick up on, especially about Heather Snellen. Okay, this is the ex-girlfriend of Steve Lawson, already been convicted in this case. He's sitting in prison.
Right.
Conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. Is what she said so important just to get into the minds of the juror, but can he be convicted of murder based on her evidence or testimony alone?
Well, no, but I think it's big. It's a big deal. And, you know, this is the first time we've really heard Joey Lawson's name. We've, you know, mentioned a little bit in the opening statement. We know his attorneys waived opening, reserved the right to open later once the prosecution's proof's done. But certainly this starts to tie into Joey Lawson with Steve Lawson. And now, you know, I assume the prosecutor, what they're going to do is to tie this to Brooks Houck somehow.
Curious, why wasn't Heather Snellen brought into the Steve Lawson case? Because Steve and his son Joseph are both charged with conspiracy to commit murder, which you would think would be tied into this statement that they were going to go move a body allegedly on the farm.
I do wonder that. You know, it seems like she would have been a great witness for that case. Maybe the prosecutors didn't want to tip their hand that she was going to be a witness in this case, so sometimes you got to balance that. Usually you play your best cards, but you know they did know they were going to have a second trial, and maybe they thought this was more important, not only against Joey Lawson, but against Brooks Houck as well.
As we said just yesterday in this broadcast, I think Joey Lawson's name yesterday was only mentioned 4 times. He just sort of sitting there with those attorneys quiet. Let's go back to Heather Snellen. Tell me, as an attorney, why what she said was so important to have out there and exposed in that courtroom today.
Well, it gets out the idea of a body, meaning there's a body somewhere, meaning Crystal Rogers is deceased. That's the implication there. You know, obviously, knowledge on Joey and Stephen Lawson's part about a body. We don't know much details about it. That's all, you know, it wasn't much she mentioned. But certainly the jury's got a big job in judging her credibility. The attorneys for the defense tried to rip her apart and say, look, you didn't come forward till years later. In fact, you were pressured by the police, and when initially questioned, you didn't come forward. But, you know, the prosecution came right back and said, tell us what the truth is. Is this the truth, what you state today? And she said, absolutely. And I think that, you know, that last line, the prosecution really got the last punch against the defense there with Ms. Snellen.
This was a shocking bit of testimony. You could almost lay it under the category of bombshell like we had earlier in the week, only because we now have names of people that we've not heard of in this case coming out of the blue, starting to fill in the stories. The one thing I find, though, interesting is they've reported in the courtroom today that as of 2021, she had never reported this to police.
Right.
So what kind of credibility does she have, Nick?
Certainly, she's got issues with credibility. But again, you know, she overhears this conversation, and they're talking about not just moving a body, Doug, moving a body at the Houck farm and with a skid steer. We've heard testimony before about a skid steer, Brooks Houck having a skid steer, things of that nature.
That's sort of like a mini little backhoe that can move around. It's not a huge one, but
right.
It's got the ability to shovel and dig.
Shovel, dig, lift things up, things of that nature. And that's why it's important. I think that's why the prosecution was so dead set on bringing her in today, is it mentions Houck Farm. She specifically said those words, and that was a big deal. Now, again, I'm not saying she doesn't have credibility issues, but what they're doing is, as we've talked about, they're starting to tie in everything and slowly build that case circumstantially.
As this trial gets closer to the 10-year mark of coming up the 4th of July weekend, this coming up, you know, Sherry Ballard, Crystal's mother, has always maintained that her daughter was killed there at that farm. If I had to put today under a banner. It would be the day of contradictions for Brooks Houck. You even had a civil engineer who occasionally worked with him, I guess. Brooks Houck had reported and written that he had seen her that day. We're talking about the July 3rd area, or talked to her, but she then came in today and contradicted it, saying, no, that's not the case. I wasn't even working that day because it was getting close to the holiday.
Certainly yesterday we kind of discussed how, in my opinion, the defense won. I think today it shifted. The prosecution won here. They put witnesses on that systematically dismantled Brooks Houck's statement. Jon Snow may end up being the star here, and I'll tell you why. He locked Brooks Houck into his statement shortly after the disappearance of Crystal. He locked him into a written statement, and he questioned him extensively for over an hour. And so, you know, it wasn't like Brooks Houck had the benefit of going back and being able to look and say, well, I'm going to answer it this way. No.
All right.
Snow targeted in on him.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we're in just a few minutes. You and I want to ask you, because I'm fascinated by that, the whole process of Jon Snow's thinking, what he asked Brooks Houck to do.
Right.
Was he thinking to this very moment? We're going to get back to that in a second. But first, after Steve Lawson's ex-girlfriend, Heather Snellen, we've been talking about her, left the stand, a woman named Ashley Nally takes the stand, and Nally said she grew up with Crystal Rogers and did not like her. According to Nally, they had personality conflicts, adding Rogers was not an outdoorsy person, didn't like the outdoors, implying she would have never gone to the Houck farm for several hours in the rain. It was raining back then, 10 years ago. Nally also said that although the two did not get along, she always saw Crystal Rogers with her son and called her, quote, an amazing mother on the stand today. Well, after Nally left the stand, several more witnesses taking the stand, poking holes in the statement of Brooks Houck that he wrote several years ago, including Tim O'Daniel with the Louisville Metro Police Department's Digital Forensics Division there. WHAS 11's Alexandra Goldberg has one of the two seats assigned to WHAS TV by the court in Bowling Green. Again, cameras forbidden from this case by order of the judge. And Alexandra, you're taking very thorough notes there, as this was a busy day of testimony. Let's talk about Tim O'Daniel. He really went after Houck's alibi. How did he do that?
Yeah, Doug, exactly. These phone records are in complete contradiction to Houck's alibi. Now, we've been talking about this written statement, 8 pages long, took Houck about an hour and a half to write. He explains his whereabouts from July 3rd, where he was, who he spoke to extensively. Well, Tim O'Daniel brought these phone records that he say are extremely precise. They're Google records, which means they essentially record the longitude and latitude, his coordinates of where he is based on location data, or precisely where that phone is. Well, let's talk a little bit about what these records show. I'm looking at my notes now so I can give you exact timing. These records show that Houck's phone arrived at the Houck family farm at 9 a.m. and did not leave until 4. Now, of course, Houck did not write in that written statement that he visited the farm in the daytime. His phone is later tracked to a lumber store at 4:22, stays there for around 20 minutes, and then he heads to his home on Glenview Drive until about 7:05, and then at 7:25 p.m., that's when he heads back to the Houck family farm. Of course, this is where prosecutors believe Crystal Rogers never returned from, and he claimed in interviews with police that after that visit that night around midnight, he headed back home. Well, his phone is also tracked to be at my old Kentucky campground at around 12:15.
All right, Alexandra, thank you very much. Let's bring back legal analyst Nick Mudd here to talk about this. You've been fascinated with the cell phone data for well over a year, Nick. You even said a year ago that this could be some of the most important evidence to come out, and that's because, is it irrefutable?
It is, and I mean, I beat a dead horse on here, Doug, with you talking about, you heard me say it from the beginning, cell phone records, tower data. And, you know, they called the best expert in the state of Kentucky, really probably one of the best experts in the eastern United States.
You're talking about Tim O'Daniel.
Tim O'Daniel. He was trained by the FBI. He's done a ton of courses. He used to be a homicide detective. He's flawless on the stand, okay? They cross-examined him at length, but he withstood it, and they really didn't do much damage with him.
So let's take folks back to, we believe now the date of disappearance, or the date of her alleged murder, is maybe July 3rd based on this cell phone information.
Right.
But let's go to when Jon Snow, Detective Jon Snow from Bardstown, who Nelson County there, who was once the lead detective, is interviewing Brooks Houck. It's around the 7th or so afterwards. And he tells him, Brooks, I want you to write down for me what you did. I want you to just give me your recollection. It took Brooks Houck about an hour and a half to write 8 pages.
Right.
Was Jon Snow at the time thinking, hey, I know we're going to match up this cell phone data with what he says. I can't wait to see what comes out of this?
He wasn't thinking that far, but he was being an excellent investigator. Any good investigator, when they have somebody that's a suspect, they're going to lock him into a statement. But he didn't just lock him into a statement after the interview. He had him write down, as you said, for an hour and a half, which means once you do that, you can't undo it. I mean, you know, he was free to go. Brooks Houck wasn't under arrest. There's no coercion there. He is freely and voluntarily given a testimonial statement where he speaks, but also a written statement. And today the prosecution really started putting their foot forward to dismantle that through, as I've said, the most irrefutable evidence you have, which is cell phone data.
Because you can't challenge it. I mean, the jury was able to watch a moving map.
Right.
And here's the way it broke down in the courtroom today. So you had Brooks Houck write out basically that he was doing a bunch of nothing, but then they were able to show that his cell phone from 9:30 to 4 p.m. was on the Houck farm on that very date. Then from 4:30 p.m. he goes off to the lumber store. Then at 7:25 he's back to the farm where he stays there till midnight. And also, Nick, you were fascinated by the fact that it shows him at a campground.
It pinged at the Old Kentucky Home Campground. You know, certainly the defense is calling this the stopover theory, which they're saying it's just hitting off random towers as he's driving by going home. I think it's a big deal, though. I think it's huge.
Well, I want you to explain why, because can you convict Brooks Houck of murder based on cell phone information?
That's the thing, Doug, is we don't just have cell phone information, though. They're starting to put theories forward. What do we hear to tie in what we just talked about earlier? Steve Lawson, Joey Lawson, talking about getting rid of a body with a skid steer on the Houck farm, okay? Piece by piece by piece. Now, certainly cell phone records are great because they really are tough to refute. We all have cell phones. They hit off towers. You walk down the street, it's hitting off. It shows you a roadmap historically of where you have been and when you were there. Doesn't necessarily say why or what you did, but again, it's another piece of the puzzle, and I think today was a big piece for the prosecution, and certainly they used that, more importantly, to undermine the statements that Brooks Houck gave, not only the written, but the testimonial statements he gave to Jon Snow back on, was it July the 5th, 6th, something around there,
yes,
right after she went missing.
So if you're the attorney speaking to the jury there, so think of this jury today. They're hearing from Heather Snellen, and then Ashley Lally gets up there and talks, and a lot of this is hearsay. And you know, can you really trust the credibility of Heather Snellen, who apparently knew this information but didn't even, as late as 2021, wasn't telling investigators about it? What are you going to tell them about the cell phone information? Is that sort of your aha moment here as we end the first week?
I think it's building that picture. You're painting that picture one step at a time. And so, you know, the prosecution doesn't have to give their whole case with one witness. They're building a house, okay? And at the end of that, they're going to put it all together, and that's what they're doing with this. They're not saying this is the moment, this is the moment. They're building a circumstantial case one piece at a time.
The reason why you're our analyst is because you spent many years in the Violent Crimes Unit as a prosecutor here locally in the county attorney's office.
I did. I worked with specifically Jim Lasowski. I tried a homicide with him together, and we got a conviction on that.
One of the prosecutors in this case.
One of the best, and he is the godfather of prosecution on the side.
So you know the prosecution. You also know the attorneys. You know Brian Butler, who is the lead attorney for Brooks Houck. What is Brian Butler thinking right now about that cell phone information?
Certainly, he did his best to dismantle as much as he could, but Tim O'Daniel's a great witness. He knows his stuff. You're not going to know more than him regarding cell phone tower data. And certainly, the defense has this stopover theory. I think they said it was hitting Wi-Fi as Brooks Houck was driving home to his own house. I don't think that came out too great for the defense today, but certainly you got to do something. You got to defend your client, and you got to, you know, fight with what you have.
The small Louisville Slugger baseball bat. You and I were listening very closely to Shay when she was on there. Tell me the significance of that.
Well, certainly we did hear in the first case with Stephen Lawson regarding that bat. But the question's going to be, you know, he talked about that bat when he gave his, I think when he testified and he gave statements in his case. We may not hear, though, his statements in this case, and I doubt we would because it's completely hearsay unless he was called to testify and chose to testify.
So the cell phone data that was shown today is date stamped July 3rd, 2015. Can we infer in that that may be the day of her death? Because it's always been reported as either the 3rd, the 4th, and then you had those people testify yesterday. They saw her in a red car on the 5th, which we don't know whether that's accurate or not.
I think the inference is late on the 3rd, early on the 4th, and certainly, you know, we have Brooks Houck at the farm from 7:30 p.m. to around, I believe it's 12:08 a.m. on the 4th, and so, you know, that lends itself to questioning, okay, what was going on? Why is he at the Old Kentucky Home Campground? You know, and I don't want to build, I'm not trying to build the prosecution case for them. They know more than I do. It's their case. They're building it, but that's a big piece going forward.
Sure, you're looking at it from both sides.
Right.
You're on both sides of that courtroom. And we're going to have Nick look ahead to next week. It's going to be a very important week in just a second. Do want to send it back out to our Alexandra Goldberg. She is in Bowling Green learning more about the last witness who took the stand today. And Alexandra, this witness claimed to be a neighbor of Brooks Houck and Crystal Rogers and revealed some shocking new details about the week after Crystal's disappearance.
Right, Doug. Mary Mattingly, she was a fascinating witness who took the stand today because she observed some really odd behavior the week of Crystal Rogers' disappearance. When she first took the stand, she explained her relationship with Crystal. She said they were friends. They spoke every day. Crystal would bake her cupcakes and embroider her children's clothing. Their kids slept over at each other's homes. And on July 4th, when she woke up in the morning, her mother walked to the front door and said, where's Crystal's car? And that's when she first got concerned. She said, well, Crystal doesn't wake up early in the morning. Well, that week, she said that she observed Rosemary and Nick Houck coming to Brooks and Rogers' home there on Glenview Drive. And she noticed two particularly odd observations that she shared. She said that, well, to back up for one moment here, she said that they came almost every day to the home, which was odd because she said that she had never seen Rosemary there before. But on one day, she noticed that Nick and Rosemary went into the Houck home, came outside, reparked their cars with the trunks facing the basement. That's when she observed Nick take 4 white bags out of his trunk, she said, not like trash bags, and place them in Rosemary's car. She also observed Rosemary was sort of digging up these purple flowers in the front lawn. She said that those purple flowers were planted by Crystal. Doug.
Very interesting. And can you explain, Alexandra, why Crystal's car would have been in view of Mary Mattingly often? I mean, why would she have looked out and noticed it was gone?
Right. She said that she lived right across the street, that she had a large window in the front of her house, that she was able to look out and see. Again, they both lived on Glenview Drive in 2015, next door neighbors just right across from each other.
And so, once again, you were talking about a possible motive there from Rosemary Houck, who isn't even charged in this case. Thank you very much, Alexandra Goldberg, who will continue her excellent coverage from Bowling Green along with Shane McAllister on Monday. Nick, let's break this down. So you had Alexandra just tell us, Mary Mattingly, good friends, neighbor, lives across the street, keeps a good eye on the car, sees it a lot. Crystal baking cupcakes. So Mary sees bags being moved back and forth, and Rosemary Houck digging up flowers. This kind of information, how does that settle with a jury?
You know, I mean, I think it's strange, but I don't put too much credence in it yet. And I tell you why. I mean, you never know what's going on in people's lives. The defense may have a plausible explanation for it. What I thought was more interesting, Doug, regarding speaking of Nick Houck, is they brought out, right before she testified, Nick Houck's phone was completely off from July the 2nd to July the 4th of 2015. There are absolutely no records except to show his phone was completely shut off. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I've never gone more than a day without my phone being on, or otherwise I'm going crazy at the cell phone store.
Once you get 20-year-old boys, you'll find that you can't get them for a couple of days. But I see your point. Yes, you need them for your lives, right, to operate. We know that Nick Houck appears in that phone call when Brooks Houck is being interviewed by Jon Snow, and that takes it to July 7th. And you're saying today the evidence showed his phone off from the 2nd through the 14th.
Through the 4th.
4th.
Second
Okay.
through the 4th.
4th.
Essentially that time period that Crystal went missing, that 3rd to 4th area. And remember, Shane Young has already said he's an unindicted co-conspirator. So, you know, I think I don't know fully what to make of it other than to say it's very strange, it's very odd.
There's Rosemary on your screen right there. That's the mother of Brooks Houck and Nick Houck.
And I wonder why Shane, the prosecutor, Shane Young, asked that question. I'm wondering if they're setting up something else later for the case.
You know, we also had, we briefly talked about this, I talked to this with Shay yesterday, but the surveillance video of cameras which were tracing Crystal Rogers as she was in a Walmart, moving around stores, showing her alive, moving around, some video we have never seen. The public only knows those still photographs of Crystal Rogers that have been released, never any digital video or old home video. Right. Do you think that's still seared into the minds of the jury? In a way, I know that showed her last moments alive, but didn't it humanize Crystal Rogers for the first time?
Oh, absolutely. And showing her with her child, you know, showing that, hey, this isn't just some person. This is a human being who's a mother, a daughter, a sister, you know, a person whose life has meaning, a mother of 4 children. And I think it gives context and shows the jury this is a serious case that severely impacted you know, really a whole community.
Let's look ahead to next week. Of course, next week's going to be an interesting week because you have the holiday parked on Friday. Yeah. The judge won't take him up there, so we'll have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday testimony in this. He is saying he's going to wrap this case up by July 8th. Do you think next week will get us closer to that possible verdict date, or what do you expect? How does this case turn next week?
I think the prosecution keeps ramping up their case. I would be surprised if they finish before Tuesday or Wednesday. I think the prosecution may go all the way till Thursday. But, you know, I believe the defense, either for Joey Lawson or Brooks Houck, I think they are going to have some witnesses. And certainly they're going to mount a defense here.
So this was an interesting week where other people's names were thrown out, like Rosemary Houck, Nick Houck. Really, we spent a lot of time on them. Again, they are not charged in this case, but they've always been suspected by the residents of Bardstown.
Right. And we've heard more and more about that, such as we talked about the phone. We heard the witness, Mary Mattingly, talking about the strange behavior. You know, so, but again, they're not on trial here. And the prosecution has to keep the focus on Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson. You know, they're not there, the jury's not there to decide that. And you don't want, as a prosecutor, you don't want a red herring and the juror worried about other people, other people's involvement, et cetera. You know, you have to keep the focus.
I am fascinated by the legal personalities in that room. Big names in this community. Right. Steve Schroering, Brian Butler on the defense side, Jim Lisowski, Shane Young, the prosecutors. These have been names around here for the longest time. I remember covering Lisowski myself when he was almost a public defender, as it is. So when do we see Brian Butler in action? Because he's the heavyweight attorney. He's the high-priced attorney in that courtroom.
He is. You know, I don't know how him and Steve Schroering split the work. You know, sometimes you say, you do the first half, I do the second half. You do these witnesses, I do those witnesses. We did see a pretty blazing cross-examination of LMPD Detective Tim O'Daniel today by Brian Butler, and certainly we got a taste of Brian's skill with that.
Talk about that. Was he able to poke holes in Tim O'Daniel, though, with his expert evidence?
I think he provided as best defense as he could. I think, you know, one of the things I thought was interesting, the detective talked about the topography and how things like concrete walls can impact whether a phone pings off a tower. And Butler ended with, he showed a picture of Crystal Rogers' abandoned car on the highway and said, quote, I don't see any concrete or hills in front of that cell tower, nothing impeding it, does it? And so I think he was doing his best to poke holes. But again, Tim O'Daniel is one of the best in the eastern United States at what he does. And so I don't think they made much headway there. They did their job, but, you know, you can't make facts, okay?
Right.
You get what you get, and that's what you got to work with.
So let's go to the Nick Mudd scorecard as we are looking at who wins the day. As far as this week has been laid out, you gave it one day to the defense. The second day was a wash.
Right.
So it was a draw. Go over your view again today as we wrap this up.
I think the cell phone tower data, which again, Doug, I don't mean to beat a dead horse. I've been talking about it for over a year. I think it's a big deal.
Well, you were accurate.
I think that the prosecution won today. So we are 1-1-1, I guess you would say. But I think we're going to see more of a stronger case for the prosecution coming next week.
Your thoughts here sitting on a Friday, Brooks Houck, Joseph Lawson, they take the stand?
No. Absolutely not. No reason to. Brooks Houck gave a statement and a testimonial, speaking statement, testimony, and a written statement. And still, with Joseph Lawson, we still haven't heard his name much, Doug. And I think his attorneys are playing it right by sitting back and waiting for their time. They are lying in wait, and they're going to strike when they need to.
The only thing is we know, because they stated it early on, and that's the prosecution, that they have no evidence of Crystal Rogers. They do not have her body. They have no inkling what happened to her. Even John Snow reported in his testimony in the courtroom this week that it was 4 years starting from the investigation, and they still had not made any arrests 4 years from her disappearance. And they had no evidence 4 years into it.
Right.
That's a cold case.
It is, absolutely. And I still say, people can cite statistics, et cetera, about cases without bodies and things of that nature, but most of those cases don't even get charged. And that's the thing. They're difficult to prove. They are difficult because you don't have a where and you don't have a how, you don't have a cause of death. That makes it very difficult for a prosecutor.
So even with today's cell phone evidence, it is still a circumstantial case.
It's going to be a circumstantial case all the way through unless we had a body. So, but you can win I have won one circumstantial case as a prosecutor on a murder case. I'm telling you, it's possible. It's difficult. It's hard, but it's possible.
Were you surprised you won that case since it was circumstantial?
It hung the first time, and I won the second time.
All right. That's something we haven't talked about in yet with this case. Could be a possibility, and we will be doing that as we are back with you at this same time Monday night. The trial resumes early in Bowling Green Monday morning. Coverage throughout the day on our WHAS 11 television newscasts. So check them out there as we'll have live reports being joined by Shay McAllister and Alexandra Goldberg in those newscasts. Then we'll be back here at Monday night, Nick Mudd and I and our crew at 9 p.m. for a deep dive on the day's proceedings, the Crystal Rogers murder mystery in Bardstown. It's on WHAS 11+. Thank you very much for watching tonight.